Every individual brings in this kernel of creativity that is much sharper than you might be. You may have one area that you're really creative at, but they have another. But a lot of companies just shut that down. We don't. We say, come in and bring your best.
All right, today we have with us Ted and Arleen Taveras, founders of Insurance Licensing Services of America and the creators of the Spot On Insurance podcast. So welcome, Ted and Arleen.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Amber. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, I think oftentimes the regulation, the compliance, the red tape of the industry gets blamed for the slower pace of innovation. How much of a factor do you think that really is?
All of those regulations are there to protect the consumer. And technology is moving so fast that it's so difficult for them to keep up. So yes, there is a slowdown there. But as we've talked to a lot of the regulators, as we've gone to the different states, they really, really want to protect the consumer. And it's these things, and sometimes new technology moves so fast that regulatory compliance is kind of, behind them a little bit. They're like, well, I don't really need to pay as much attention to that. That's kind of changed in the last 2 years because there have been, millions, like $100 million fines and things like that now got everybody's attention. So they're focused on them. I think regulatory compliance has to be at the forefront for whatever you do for technology, and an understanding that, yes, it will take a little bit more time, but once you clear a couple of hurdles and you get that green flag, it's full speed ahead.
I think also, just to touch a little bit more on that, is if you're being so innovative and you're way ahead of the regulations, it's so important, your relationship with the regulators, because the regulators do want to work with all of these startups and the innovative things. So if you have those conversations with the regulators and explain your product and what you're trying to do, that regulator will work with you and say, okay, well, we can't change this, but perhaps we can do this. So it's so important, that conversation with the regulators.
And what are your thoughts on content in general in the insurance industry right now? How much do you consume yourselves?
So I would love to consume more, but it's difficult, right? You're so busy with your day-to-day. But I mean, I'm big on LinkedIn. Like, that is where I spend a lot of time on. I have probably about 25,000 insurance professionals on my network. So I do have like a lot of private conversations, mentoring and sharing of resources. So that is where, and I read up what's going on, like, what company is doing what. So I try to stay on top of what's being put out on LinkedIn and a couple of the, the digital platforms, news. I want to say newspapers, but just digital media.
Yeah. Yep.
But I'll tell you something, it is overwhelming. There's so much out there that you have to keep up with. Like she said, we have LinkedIn, we go to Facebook, we go to Instagram. But for that, it gets to a point where you need a team. There is no way that you will ever be able to do your job and do it right if you are constantly paying attention to everything that's going on there. There's just not enough time in the day. So we actually have a team of people that we've that help us with that as well.
And they're great. They'll shoot over articles and say, hey, did you guys see this article? What do you think about it and whatnot?
One thing we like to close with is, what is one thing that you have learned in the past month?
So I'll start off. To me, it's not so much that I've learned it, but I think it's been re-emphasized, is that you can't take things for granted. We, having had our business, 20-something years, we went through the Great Recession, where, it taught us so many valuable lessons, that just because you've made it in business over 10 years at that point doesn't mean that you'll continue to be in business, right? That was a hard time. Then all of a sudden, here we were, with COVID. It's like, boom, smack. One day, it's like everyone's on lockdown, not just in the US, but all over the world. So it's kind of, to me, like just it's being reiterated, like, do not take things for granted. Don't procrastinate. Do things, you know, be ready. Have a good nest egg. Cherish having these great jobs that we have in our industry, because nothing is guaranteed.
In the last month, month and a half or so, I have been heavily into Stoicism. I was reading a book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way, and I was so impressed with how much Zen was in there, how much Eastern philosophy seemed to be in there at the Roman times, that these guys are really brilliant. So I then went into the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and how does this play into what we do? That living our life stress-free, no matter what comes at you, accepting when life hits you with all of these surprises, how to deal with each one of those surprises. And I found that it's extremely, extremely helpful, because you can be attacked as an owner of a business from so many different areas, and to be able to just see it and calmly just deal with it. I mean, you're talking about being cancer-free in a sense, unless you're contaminated by something else. But the stress isn't creating all these hormones and all these things that are messing up your system. And you're able to be so much more clear-headed when it comes to dealing with business issues, business in general.
I think gets at a really key point for just, well, what we often call work-life balance, but it really just like optimizing your life and appreciating your life and being present, and mindfulness and all of that is not letting all of those day-to-day stresses detract from, you know, your true contentedness as a human. So not to get too deep on you know, our 10-minute podcast here, but I think that's actually something that I think is really important. And obviously we're realizing it a lot during COVID. It's those small things, it's family, it's quality time, but to keep that going even past the pandemic is to embrace some of those pieces. We'll have to check out that book. The Obstacle is the Way, you said?
The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And that just gets you into a little rabbit hole for Stoicism if you really like what it's saying. But within it, like I said, it's got Zen, the power of now. So many of them get you focused on what you're doing today and what's going on in the world now, and how to just accept everything that's happening to you. It's a really, really brilliant book.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. Hopefully we can connect in person in 2021 and help you enjoy the rest of your summer in Puerto Rico.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Our pleasure to have joined you.
A real pleasure.
Thank you.